Hi, it's Brian Berg with BB Direct, and today we're talking about the compiled consumer database. It's a very popular file that a lot of mailers use to target their audience and sell their goods and services. So this is what we're talking about today. It's a simple overview, but it's very helpful for a lot of people, so stay tuned. Today we're talking about the compiled consumer database. So for starters, let's look at the difference between the compiled data and response file data. The compiled data is typically sourced from hundreds of different sources of information, whereas response data typically has one source. These are the responders to a particular offer. They could be subscribers to one magazine. They could be buyers of a product or service, or they could be responders to an application of some sort. They're typically much smaller data set than the compiled file data. The compiled file data is more affordable, whereas the response file data is typically much more expensive. Ease of access for compiled data: simply run a count, place an order, you get the data, you do the mailing. Whereas response file data, you have to jump through a few hoops. You typically have to provide the sample mail piece to us. We get it approved by the owner of the list before they actually release the data. And if you're wanting to market into a specific area, a small area of your town or your county, and you're looking at a small response file of, say, maybe 1 or 2 million records in the entire US, you may not have very many people within your market territory, and typically the response file data requires a 5,000 to 10,000 record minimum in order to rent that data. So the compiled data is much larger. It typically covers every state in the country, every zip code in the US, and the vast majority of all the adults in the US, whereas, again, the response file could be less than 1 million records for the entire file. So why go to this one over this one? Well, obviously this one's larger, but many companies benefit from response file data because the response file data has a unique characteristic common among all the people across that response file. So a little bit more about the compiled data. When we use the compiled data, we're typically looking at a particular finite geography around your market territory, around your store in your market territory. We're looking to try to filter a segment within that territory to identify specific demographics, age and income, let's just say. Maybe home value, or maybe presence of child within the household, to identify potential prospects for your direct mail campaign. How it's built: we start with building out a base file for the compiled consumer database. We collect information from it. I don't personally collect information, but the way these things are built is we're collecting information from the public records, the courthouse, census information, phone directories, third-party self-reported information. You may have filled out an online application. You might have filled out some type of survey to identify or respond to a particular interest. There might be some other proprietary publishers that will, for a small fee, will rent their data to enhance the base file of the compiled database. And the build process for this information starts with collecting all these different sources: the public record information, these proprietary sources, these third-party contributors. We're collecting the names and the addresses of the individuals within the US. And then we address standardize all the addresses so that we can make sure Brian Berg is spelt the same way and my address is the same on every single record from every single source. We can then dedupe them, so we have one Brian Berg at this one address. We know if 6 or 7 different sources said Brian lives at this address, because all the addresses are standardized and the same, then we know that that's probably where he lives. Whereas if we have an outlying 4th or 5th or 6th source that says that he lives elsewhere, that address is questionable. So typically a compiled database has records that have been multi-verified from multiple sources before they're added on to the database. So we dedupe the file, we run it through the do not mail and the deceased file process, which eliminates a lot of these records that people just simply do not want to receive any direct mail anymore. They do not exist any longer, they've passed. And then we cast certify and we also NCOA the file. We then take our base file and we append a variety of different elements to the records that we have, known name and known address. And when we add this information, it allows us, marketers, to filter and segment within our geography and particular parts of the population that have common age and income and so forth. This is, in a sense, target marketing. So these elements are added to the database, and it all goes onto that base file and enables us to do some further filtering, what we call selects, to enhance our ability to target very specifically who we're wanting to market to. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions about the compiled consumer database, the representatives at BB Direct would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching.